to send a message that not only do you want that change in Washington, not only do you want the experience that is necessary to serve you in the 1st Congressional, but you also want that change right here at home. And if I am able to prevail, you will be sending several different messages, all of which I believe most of us agree with. Thank you.
Since we started with Senator Hanabusa, Councilman Djou, I'll ask the question that you can start it. Mr. Case can follow you, and we'll end the question with Senator Hanabusa. 30 minutes. And then you'll have a 1-minute rebuttal or clarification, and then an optional rebuttal or clarification after. The first submitted question asks, with our national economy failing and unemployment at low levels, will you support extending the tax relief passed during the Bush administration? Why or why not?
Clearly the economy and the struggles that we're facing here in our economy is the top issue. We've got to find a way to turn around our economy and provide more jobs. And there's a right way and a wrong way to do it. The way that clearly has not worked thus far for our nation is what the Congress has been doing over the last 14 months. Initially what the United States Congress is doing is try to pour money and throw money at fixing this problem. We tried a program of cash for clunkers, a program which is supposed to help turn around the American auto industry. Many of you may have, some of you may have even participated in that program last year. This program, of course, as many of you may have recalled, was to turn in your old low-mileage vehicles and purchase new high-mileage vehicles. Well, according to CNN, that program, which costed all of you several $billion, costed the American taxpayer approximately $24,000 per additional vehicle sold. It actually would have been cheaper. It would have been cheaper for the American taxpayers to just have purchased brand new vehicles and given them away. But that, in a nutshell, is a perfect example of what Congress's current mentality is. That is, bureaucrats know best, and if we spend money, it'll eventually fix the problem. Another great example of what's not working here is our stimulus program. Last year, the United States Congress passed a program to spend $160 billion of your money. It was a program which was proposed when the national unemployment rate was 7%. It passed the Congress when the employment rate was 8%, and it was promised to the American people that we needed it to prevent unemployment from ever cresting above 8.5%. And today, of course, we see our national unemployment rate floating just a little below 10%. My philosophy, and what I want all of you to understand if I am fortunate enough to get elected to Congress, is I have far more faith in hundreds of millions of Americans spending a few $100s than a few hundred bureaucrats spending hundreds of billions of dollars. The current mentality in Congress that we can turn around our economy just throwing taxpayer money over and over and over again on programs that don't work with no plan to pay it back needs to change course. I do believe that one of the best ways we can effectuate turning around our economy is reducing our taxes, putting more money in the hands of average Americans. And that's how we're going to get this economy started and rolling again. So consequently, I do support things such as reducing the capital gains tax rate. I do support reducing marginal tax rates, and I do support eliminating the estate tax. These are the right ways we can fix our economy instead of continuing to spend money. Thank you.
Just to clarify, is this 1 minute? 1 minute. Okay. 3 for the first person and 1 minute. Well, the specific...
You have 3 minutes. Each candidate has 3 minutes. And then after that, we'll do 1 minute.
The specific question that was answered, asked was, do you support the continuation of the tax reductions that were enacted during the Bush administration? That was a specific question which I will not try to answer. Let's back up a second and lay the foundation here. During the presidency of George Bush, there were a number of tax cuts that were advocated for and passed. Those were advocated for and passed on the basis that we needed to provide a stimulus to our economy, that we needed to reduce taxes, and those were all given sunset dates. So in other words, the tax reductions expired at some point, unless they were extended by affirmative action. And those were enacted, and those sunset dates are coming up. So the specific question is, what do we do about those sunset dates? Now let's lay the foundation here, because we are talking about fiscal accountability, fiscal transparency, and fiscal balance. And by the way, I do agree with Charles that we need a balanced budget amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which I actually introduced during my prior service, 2002 to 2007. Now, during the presidency of George Bush, we saw a massive increase in our national debt and deficits. That was caused because we threw our economy and budget out of balance. It had been balanced at the end of the Clinton presidency. And I say this not in a partisan way, I just say it from a factual perspective. And there were two basic reasons why the budget went so incredibly out of balance. $6 trillion of debt up to about $10 trillion of debt in just a few short years. We're at 12 trillion now, so you can see that the deterioration has been on both watches. We had massive tax cuts, which led to complete revenue reductions in the trillions of dollars a year, and we had a failure to curb spending at the same time, and actually we ramped up spending, so that threw everything out of whack. Now things aren't free. They're simply not free. You've got to face the music somewhere. If you're going to reduce revenues and that doesn't stimulate an economic offsetting increase in revenues, which can happen but hasn't happened in this situation, then you've got to reduce your spending if you're going to do that. If you are going to increase your spending, then you've got to face the music of increasing taxes or finding some other way to obtain the revenues. That's called pay-go. I advocated for pay-go, that you have to face the music every single time. And in that context, in terms of the specific question asked, I believe some of those tax cuts should be extended and made permanent, especially those that give middle-class tax relief. But I did feel that the tax cuts on the upper income Americans were unaffordable and unnecessary at the time to stimulate an economic recovery and threw our economy out of balance, and I probably would not vote to extend those.
I too heard the question being asked as to whether or not to vote to extend the Bush tax cuts. And of course, my response is no, especially the bad tax cuts that were afforded to the higher income. Now let's look at this whole situation that we're in now. It isn't something that occurred within the past 14 months. It occurred over a long period of time, and I believe beginning, now we must remember, President Clinton had a surplus when he left. So beginning with the Bush administration, and in particular a war that I never supported, the Iraq War, I believe once we went down that path, we caused the downfall of where we are now in terms of the economy. Now let's also understand that what has happened in that period of time. We have developed this concept of too big to fail, and that's what's happened with Wall Street and some of the bigger banks, is that we have had to bail them out because the question is, what then happens? We were heading for the worst recession in 70 years, the worst recession in 70 years. And then what does government do? Government did enact stimulus, and I disagree that stimulus did not work in Hawaii. In fact, stimulus is what has helped us balance our budget. Look at what stimulus actually created. In Moilili in particular, you look at the Moilili Hunganji down the other part there, and it has a project Dana. And what that means is to keep elderly in their homes. You know, a major component of being successful in that is Meals on Wheels. Meals on Wheels, we actually appropriated in the state legislature, and this governor wouldn't release it. Stimulus funded Meals on Wheels and keeps that program alive. The only meal that some elderly can actually rely on, that's part of that stimulus package. Let's also look at the stimulus package and what it did in terms of extending tax deductions for small business and for individuals taking it. That's also critical for how we begin to stimulate this economy. Race to the top, which is the way we're going to attack education. That's all part of the stimulus package. FMAP, which does the Medicaid provisions for those who are needy. Now, these are not issues that you can ignore. These are issues that affect every single one of us, or people that every single one of us care about. And to say that we shouldn't do this, or government has no role in doing this, is not right. Especially when these are the people have nothing to do with the situation that we're in today. We are in a situation that began with the Bush